Apologies for my tardiness, everyone. If we're ready, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. This is the April 9th, 2026 TCC. I will be your remote chair for the day. Enjoy the strange picture of my face. And with that, I can't see who's there, but Hannah or Asha, would you take us around for introductions, starting in the room?
Steve Williams, NCDOT Division 14.
Stephen Sparks, NCDOT Division 13.
Chris Madlin, NCDOT Division 13.
Doug Phillips, NCDOT Division 13.
Jeremy Chapman, NCDOT Regional Traffic Engineer.
Vicky Easton, Lane Scout RTO.
Tristan Winkler, French Fighter FBRMPO.
Ada McGovern, Safe Routes to School.
J.D. O'Connor, French Fighter FBRMPO.
Hannah Bagley, French Fighter FBRMPO. Asha Rader, Land Sky Regional Council. Danny Bravo, Land Sky Regional Council.
Noah Taylor, Town of Maggie.
I'm Daniel Sellers with NCDOT's Transportation Planning Division.
Olin Dalehousen with Condon Company.
And then online I have Autumn Ratcliffe.
Autumn Ratcliffe, Henderson County.
Lily Donahoe.
Chloe Donahoe, Buncombe County.
Elizabeth Pease. Jason S. Myers. Eddie McFall.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Eddie McFalls.
Jessica Morris.
Here.
John Hunter.
John Hunter, NCDOT, TPD.
Lucy Crown.
Good morning. I'm here.
Matthew Manley.
I'm just listening in today. I'm otherwise occupied. Sorry, got a sick kid at home.
Matt, most of us are just listening. It's not a problem.
Mike Malachek.
Good morning from Mills River.
Ricky Hurley.
Good morning.
Troy Wilson.
Troy Wilson, NCDOT Division 14.
And William High.
Hi, everybody. Buncombe County, William High. And I see that Elizabeth chimed in via the chat that she is here. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Okay, with that, is there any public comment at this time? All right, hearing none, let's move on. We have an first item is the approval of our agenda and consent agenda. Is there any discussion, or would someone like to make a motion for approval thereof?
This is Vicky. I'll make a motion to approve.
All right. Asha, Lucy Crown.
Aye.
Art, Jessica Morris.
Aye.
Buncombe County, William High.
Approve.
Buncombe Transit, Chloe Donahoe.
Approved.
TPD, Daniel Sellers.
Approved.
Henderson County, Autumn Ratcliffe.
Aye.
Hendersonville, Matt Manley. Maggie Valley, Noah Taylor.
Aye.
Mills River, Mike Malachek.
Approved.
RPO, Vicky Eastland.
Aye.
Waynesville, Elizabeth P.
Aye.
Woodson, Ricky Hurley.
Aye.
NCDOT Division 13, Doug Phillips.
Aye.
NCDOT Division 14, Steve Williams.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Thank you, everyone. With that, we'll move on to our first and only business item, congestion management process.
All right, 1 second. Okay, this is our biennial update to our congestion management process. Just a little bit of background, what is the congestion management process, or CMP? That is a federally required document for larger MPOs or TMAs. That's required to evaluate and measure congestion in the MPO planning area, as well as make general recommendations on how congestion should be addressed throughout the region. The way our CMP is set up is there's an original framework that sets up what routes we are going to monitor, evaluate, and make recommendations for. That was passed by the MPO board in 2019. We have issued biennial reports in 21, 23, and now 26. We missed our 25 deadline, but it was a busy year. So with just a few bits of basics on our CMP, we identified routes to monitor based on traffic volumes, truck volumes, present day volumes to capacity, as well as projected volumes to capacity. So to note, it doesn't include every road in the region, but we kind of filtered through to get the ones that are most likely to have a significant amount of congestion in the region. I'll also note that our CMP is considered pretty unique. So our CMP lays out different recommendations for addressing congestion based on land use, transportation, and demographic context. I.e., we don't recommend dealing with interstate congestion the same way we do on Main Street. So we have different ideas of how congestion should be dealt with. To get into the data, or some of the high-level overview of the data from this biennial report, this is the overall total hours of delay in the 5-county region. So this includes more than just the MPO. This includes all of Buncombe, Haywood, Henderson, Madison, and Transylvania. The data just comes a little more easily that way. But just to note, we are still experiencing levels of delay significantly lower than what we were before the pandemic. I do think 2019 was a significant year for congestion, especially with some of the work being done on the Jeff Bowen Bridge. But either way, what we've seen is kind of a change in overall delay in the region. As part of the report, there's a data source from the University of Maryland that looks at causes of delay and causes of congestion. One of the most significant things, and we brought this up in the last report, is the change in recurrent congestion. That is, recurrent congestion is kind of what people typically think of your daily traffic jams. Our recurrent congestion has dropped very significantly since 2019. In 2019, that made up more than 60% of what was assigned as a cause of congestion. That's now less than 10% based on this data set. To note, we have seen increases in some other categories, most notably congestion related to incidents and congestion related to incidents in work. Basically what is causing our congestion appears to be shifting from what we had been seeing before the pandemic. As part of this report, a big undertaking is looking at travel time reliability rather than simply looking at volumes. Just to note, big thanks to Daisy and Nicole on our team for putting together a lot of the travel time reliability data and mapping it. It is a big undertaking, but just to revisit some things that we've noted in these reports, looking at reliability in our AM peak hours, our region is quite reliable in the morning peak hours. So just to give an idea of this, I mean, if there were red on this map, red would be signifying areas where there's some real reliability issues. All in all, our morning peaks are relatively muted. There are a few areas throughout the region, so it's not to say everything is totally reliable in our morning peaks, but it does make sense considering the number of retirees that we have. They are not, I guess, waking up and jamming our roads in the morning, and also just the makeup of our workforce. I'll also note that the reliability in the morning, even though our network has always kind of been more reliable in the morning peak, it's even improved since the last time we did this report. However, the afternoon or the PM peak is considerably different. More than a quarter of our roads that are part of this report are considered to have reliability issues. And so that is a significant shift from our morning. There's marginal improvement since last time we did this report. I would say it's relatively insignificant, but I think that generally goes along with what we know about our region, especially Friday afternoons tend to be a time when there's considerably more congestion. The report also includes information on bottlenecks in the region. I do think this is really interesting. To note, I-26 is on there. I don't think anyone's surprised. I-26 has always been on there. But the other route that has been highlighted in these reports is I-40, which of course is undergoing significant work due to Hurricane Helene repairs.
And every bridge in the weekend.
And well, one of those bridges is highlighted. But I think the thing to point out there is, you know, there's been some discussion about the role of resilience in transportation prioritization. To me, I think this shows that resilience isn't something that necessarily competes with addressing congestion. It's something that helps to buttress our areas where there's expected to be congestion. The other thing to note is on this, usually when we've done this, it's been interstate bottlenecks. One bottleneck that popped up in the top 10 this year was Patton at New Leicester Highway. We've talked a lot about the New Leicester to Patton approach. However, this report actually shows the westbound Patton movement as one of the major bottlenecks. I won't go through all of this, but I'll just note in the report there's additional bottleneck information. We included the top 5 non-interstate bottlenecks in each county. So we hope that's information you all will find helpful. So Buncombe, Henderson, Haywood, Madison, the truck traffic going through Hot Springs certainly showed up in this report. So that's something we hope you'll find helpful. Also in the report is information that pertains to how we move around, mostly in terms of commuting data. So just to note, this is the general breakup of how people commute to work. A little more information on that. This comes from the U.S. Census Bureau. People are asked to provide their primary means of accessing work. So if you drive 3 days a week and walk 2 days a week, you're asked to provide what's the mode you use most predominantly. It doesn't capture a lot of the data that you know, people might use from time to time. I'll also note that, and I'll note this again, this data is focused on commute to work, so it doesn't capture a lot of other trips for shopping, recreation, going to visit friends, etc. One thing that's kind of interesting is looking at the commuters driving alone in our region. The percent of commuters driving alone in the 5-county region has been declining somewhat significantly. To note, that's not just a trend from the pandemic. That trend actually started to appear with a peak in 2015 and declines since then. And that is showing up in the percentage of workers that are driving alone, as well as the total number of workers driving alone. I think to account for a lot of that change, we have seen a significant rise in working from home. As a reminder, our region was seeing that significant increase from before the pandemic. Before the pandemic, we had the 6th highest percentage of workers working from home in the country. We've dropped in rankings, but we have still seen more and more people reporting working from home in our region. And to note, in terms of county totals, we're seeing those increases happening county by county. I think previously we reported that Haywood County wasn't seeing as much of an increase. We're starting to see that pick up significantly in Haywood County. In terms of modes of more sustainable transportation, again, just to note, the commuting to work data shouldn't be taken as overall demand for use of these modes. Again, because this doesn't account for other types of trips besides access and work. However, I do think this data is a bit of a canary in the coal mine in terms of overall use of these modes. We have seen walking, biking, transit relatively stable in this data set over the last 14 years. Carpooling was going down for a number of years, but has seen a bit of an uptick in the last couple of years. So hopefully something we'll continue to see. And just to note, with these trends, especially with walking, biking, and transit, we're kind of seeing this across the board. We kind of thought we'd see the opposite when we pulled in some of the data from some of our more urban areas, but we're kind of seeing the same trend. This chart reflects some of the data from Asheville. But to note, again, with our congestion management process, a big part of the original framework was looking at areas where people are expected to be walking and biking more often. We call those our walkable urban places, or our walk-ups. And those are areas in the CMP where strategies that look at potential mode shift, as well as having a more relaxed level of service, have been recommended. To go along with that, this data report does include information on some of those corridors in those walk-up areas and what's being seen in terms of bike ped safety. So to note, these are some of the corridors that have moved up the list. Merriman Avenue between 240 and Beaver Dam. Based on data from 2020 to 2024, there's a total of 26 bike ped crashes, 3 of those serious or fatal. Patton Avenue between Haywood Road and I-240, also 3 serious and fatal with a total of 16 crashes. I won't read through all of these. I will note that Merriman definitely seen a significant increase since the last time we did this report. But to note, safety, both real and perceived, are important things that people think about when they consider how they're going to make trips. This report also touches on commuting patterns, something that is likely to be driving some areas of congestion. A more accurate way to put some of the data that we use from the longitudinal employer household dynamics data is worker-employer connections. The big takeaway is we're continuing to see the trend of fewer and fewer people in our region living and being employed in the same county. I think that implies a couple of things. One of those is we're seeing more cross-county commuting for people to access work, but also the people working from home. We are likely seeing this reflected in the data, especially when we see little bits of data of people being employed in places like Washington, D.C. They most likely are not commuting. That is most likely a remote job. But with these commute patterns, what I think some of the significant shifts we've seen, workers from Henderson County being employed in Buncombe, we've seen those numbers more than double over the last 20 years. Subtle shifts to Buncombe workers going to Henderson, Haywood to Buncombe. Noteworthy, Buncombe workers employed in Mecklenburg County. That actually goes along with a pattern of remote work from other parts of the country. There's a lot of scenic places, more scenic places that are close but not too close to some larger job centers. And so we think that is likely a lot of that remote work trend being reflected. Madison County to Buncombe, and one of the more significant shifts, McDowell County workers coming into Buncombe. We also have a little bit of information on some of the lower income workers. We've noted this shift before, especially in some of our job centers, though this isn't unique just to Asheville, but it is kind of the most apparent, is some of the lower income workers. Fewer and fewer of them are working and living within Asheville, or even living within Buncombe County. More and more of those low income workers are coming from outside of Buncombe County. And we're seeing that kind of reflected in some of the other demographic data that we've shared before as well. But that's an important thing to think about in terms of how our employers access and recruit workers, how workers are able to reliably get to jobs, and how we provide transportation infrastructure to assist with that. But all in all, that's kind of a high-level summary of the data report. We are looking for a recommendation to approve the data report by the MPO board. Are there any questions or comments?
Hi. I have a question on almost every slide, but that's just my nerdy take on things. But specifically about telework. Well, now I lost it. Concerning the last slide, that's what I remember. The commuting in from McDowell County jumped, like tripled. That's starting to become a significant part of McDowell County's population, so they just check the numbers. And have you checked the threshold for what would trigger their inclusion in the CSA statistical area? Because I remember checking that maybe a decade ago, and it was getting kind of close.
I still think we have a significant way to go because I do think McDowell workers are kind of pulled, the last time I checked, in a few different directions, both towards kind of the Hickory MSA as well as kind of down to Rutherford. So I don't think we are terribly close on that front, but it's definitely a trend that's continuing to increase.
Okay.
Can you drill down on those folks commuting in to income?
Yeah, we can get into some of that data.
I would be interested to see if it's because of the housing.
Yeah, I think it's a fair hypothesis to state that a lot of what is likely driving the change in commuting patterns is people trading housing costs for transportation costs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Both for them.
Yeah. Or, near the beginning, you had a chart of the congestion that really fell off a cliff after 2019. And thankfully, it has not recovered, post-COVID and, and I don't know if that's a full trend just because of more teleworking and carpooling, but it hasn't really gone up at all since 2020. And I wonder how this compares to other MPOs, like around the state. Have some of them seen more resurgence, or they also kind of dropped and then found a flat line?
I'm not aware. That's something we can look into. But I do think all in all, the increase in teleworking nationally and especially in urban areas, it hasn't, I think there's a misconception that people take teleworking as people not driving. I think there's some studies that say that happen, others say people sometimes make up for their lack of commuting by driving more for something else. But I think all in all, what we are seeing is a redistribution of when trips are being made. I think we're kind of seeing that, based on the increase in reliability in our peak hours since the last time we did this report. But as you can see, the number of hours in congestion still increased. So we're likely seeing a redistribution of when people are making those trips and likely some different hours where we might be seeing a bit more congestion than we were before.
Keep bumping in here, I'm sorry. The interest data does not necessarily include all or any of the secondary roads or the lower traffic NC, does it?
It includes almost all of the interstate US and NC routes in the region. It does also include some secondary roads, but not all of them. And again, this data is kind of through the filter.
Right, I understand. I'm just pointing out that I do think I agree. Everything has changed. I don't disagree with this chart. And I will say that a lot of people are going other routes due to obvious limitations.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, that's
I think people are avoiding some bottlenecks.
I would just say, like other data I've seen and other statistics agrees with your explanation, and just to kind of reinforce that for the committee. Everybody tries to travel at one time, congestion gets really bad, but a little bit of spread can have a huge improvement because of the kind of parabolic nature of congestion. So.
Lucy, you've had your hand raised likely or something?
Could you explain how you're able to find out who is commuting and who's working from home?
So you're referring to
just how you capture the data.
That's a great question. So that data comes from the U.S. Census Bureau's American Community Survey. So it is survey data. We do take the 5-year estimates. So my bet is the percent shown in working from home is likely a little bit conservative. We're still continuing, at least based on the data, we're continuing to see increases. Yeah, it's a great question to note. It is survey data collected by the U.S. Census Bureau.
Thanks.
I just have one question. Does this account for industry change? At least for Haywood, I would say that big uptake is the mill closure to Buncombe. I know a lot of people who went to GE or Pratt & Whitney that worked at the mill. Does it have any tie into that, the lost industry?
I think that is some information that we can kind of infer, but you can't really get down to that level of, these are employees that used to go here and then now go over here. I think we'd have to do a smaller level survey to get to that. But I mean, all in all, I think with Haywood County, we've seen a sustained increase in the number of residents from Haywood going to work, especially in Buncombe County.
I think you got a slide on the number of people commuting to work, but as a percentage of overall trips, do you know if that been shifting with possibly more retirees or possibly just as a percent of all trips? As we talk about time distribution, but also just the composition distribution.
Right, that's a great point. I mean, I'm not sure about its overall distribution in terms of how much of a share of trips it makes up. I do know, and I think you can back me up on this, that trips to work or trips from work, employment-related trips do tend to take up a bit of the lion's share in terms of causing especially recurrent congestion events. Kind of the Fred Flintstone, the whistle blows and everyone gets in their cars at the same time. That's why we have a TDM program. But specifically, no, I'm not aware of that. Great question.
Is there any way from that data for the folks who are commuting from an outlying county to Buncombe, there's quite an uptick. Is there any way to correlate that to see if that is longstanding residents of those counties changing where they're working, or are these folks that are moving in that may be moving out of Buncombe and then commuting back? Is there any way to extrapolate that at all?
No, we don't have the native versus foreigner data set, but I do think that is a part of the equation. Just overall I think we are seeing, especially with some of the lower income data. It's all you can do is hypothesize with that, but I do think it's a fair and interesting assumption that a lot of people are moving to different places where housing might be cheaper, but maintaining their same place of employment.
Kind of just food for thought for later, but I want to think about how that question interacts with the household survey plan and see if we can explore that from any other directions.
Yeah, I think the household survey would help inform that question.
Obviously, their households could be out of the region, so.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions, comments? We are looking for recommendation to approve the biennial report to the board.
I'll make the recommendation.
I'll second.
Asheville, Lucy Pratt.
Aye.
Art, Jessica Morris.
Aye.
Buncombe County, William Hyde.
Approve.
Buncombe Transit, Chloe Donahoe.
Approve.
TCD, Daniel Sellers.
Approved.
Henderson County, Autumn Radcliffe.
Aye.
Hendersonville, Matt Manley. Maggie Valley, Noah Taylor. Mills River, Mike Malachek. RPO, Vicki Eastland. Waynesville, Elizabeth Teague.
Aye.
Houston, Ricky Hurley.
Aye.
NCDOT Division 13, Doug Phillips. NCDOT Division 14, Steve Williams. The ayes have it.
I have been having the worst time with Zoom today. Anyway, thank you, everybody. With that, it concludes all of our voting items. And with that, we'll take it over to Division 13 for Exit 44 improvements.
Yeah, just to note, this was a request to add to our agenda, and I will say this is an item where there's a potential where MPO action might be needed in the future if a few things go a certain way. But either way, this relates to the Costco development. And some of the discussion about the potentially required transportation improvements if such a development were to go in. So I think at this point we are just planning to discuss and get more information, and if action is needed in the future, we can consider that. But Doug, please take it away.
Okay. So a lot of discussion about the Exit 44 area recently, and just kind of to walk through where we were and where we are, and also talking about over the next time period what we're going to be doing as far as planning and forecasting and different design considerations. So first, regarding the development interest near Exit 44, as Tristan mentioned, a large retailer had submitted a traffic impact analysis request for a proposed project in that area. As many folks know, that application was later withdrawn by the developer or retailer. Following that withdrawal, I believe some local government folks reached out to the developer wanting to re-engage, I'm assuming because of the regional impacts and importance for the area. So since then, the developer has initiated additional conversations with DOT. They've reached out to our district office asking specific questions about right-of-way in that area and getting clarification there, which would indicate, obviously, continued interest. They've also started or stated their intention to resubmit the TIA request, although as of today, we have not received that new application. In preparation for that potential resubmittal, as well as other known and projected development in the area, Division 13 has begun refreshing the traffic forecast in the area. And as it relates to the 2513 project, this updated forecast extends over a wider area, specifically further along Smoky Park Highway than the earlier models were showing. That should give us a more complete picture of the expected growth and traffic patterns in the area. The refreshed forecast is not limited only to the TIA for this one particular development, but it also incorporates multiple known upcoming projects and projected projects in the area. Hopefully that gives us a stronger foundation for our long-term planning. Once that updated forecast is complete and returned to us, we'll evaluate whether adjustments to the 2513C project can be made during the preliminary phases there. So our goal is to understand if and how interchange improvement plans can be refined to provide more effective long-term performance, especially with the renewed interest in development of that corridor. This evaluation will be based on our refreshed forecast and analysis and coordination with the developer if and when the TIA is resubmitted. There's also been discussion of potential support letter from the RPO, as Kristen alluded to. We certainly welcome collaboration. However, our recommendation at this point is that any formal letter of support be issued after the traffic analysis and forecast is complete, and once we've been able to fully evaluate that against existing plans and updated data. So the timing of a letter of support, we would prefer that to come later so that it could speak more specifically and more accurately to the needs of the whole area of Exit 44, maybe not just specifically the Costco as referenced. And so finally, we're also exploring the possibility of additional funding sources for either smaller scale or interim improvements. We will be looking at options that could address the near-term challenges and the larger interchange project, or as the larger interchange project moves forward. So with that, if there's any questions that we can answer or expand on, we're glad to. And if we don't know the answers, we'll find them.
Can you give us an idea of the new limits of the forecast on Southern Park?
I don't know the limits. Like I said, I know it extends further out Smoky Park. I can get those specific limits unless you happen to know.
No.
Is that further out in each direction?
I know specifically, let's see. I assume it does go some in each direction. I believe going towards Asheville is the area that it extended further, I believe. Now, I don't want to speak to that because I don't know. So
I'm just curious because the development is happening away from Asheville.
Okay.
There's an ongoing discussion. You've got Acton Circle, and the original forecast was to the east side of Acton Circle.
Acton Circle where the signal is, or Acton Circle where the GPS is?
Where the side closest to exit 44, McDonald's.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if the expansion has been pushed to the other side of Acton Circle. That was part of developing the new forecast limits to see where that limit would be.
But that would be for section C?
I believe so.
Okay.
Is that still funded in state line?
That is not funded.
That is unfortunate.
Are we talking about 2513C?
Yes.
Yeah, that's unfunded right now. Right. It's got to compete this round.
No, y'all renumbered those so many times. Where's C in the north-southeast west?
C is the interchange improvements to 240, 2640. I think it goes in either direction on 40, like out towards the farmer's market, and then here to 44, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, C is the southern section of I-2513, the 2640, 240 interchange. Confusingly, it goes C, A, B.
Yeah.
What is the project underway right now on I-40? I-2513.
I believe that's 2513. Excuse me. DD or BD.
Because we just keep changing.
Yeah. There's no.
I'm surprised that we aren't considering these improvements for that project, which is currently underway.
And that is definitely a potential, depending on what is shown through the traffic forecast and the TA, we're exploring all options on that.
So, yeah, I mean, I think just to try to digest this, I mean, so the original request for this was to have the MPO kind of do an amendment to our 25-year plan, which would really only be needed if there's a standalone project to upgrade the interchange with I-40. Yeah, I mean, that would really be the only scenario in which an MTP amendment would be needed. But that's part of why we're adding this information is we don't know if there would be an independent project. We don't know if it's something that would be folded in to other existing projects. I do think the general thing that's being grappled with, though, is that, previous forecasts were made for that project as well as at the region-wide level on the assumption that that property was going to be industrial, which would not have the type of impact on volumes as a large retailer would. And so, yeah, this does, I think, really illustrate how kind of that shift in potential land uses can really impact projects that we have underway and projects we're considering for the future. And yeah, I mean, I do think as part of the update to the forecast and the change of scope, what kind of change in costs we're really looking at in terms of how would that impact whichever project might take on those improvements.
Well, and really until we get the forecast back and do the TIA, you know, those are going to be parts that really drive what all is going to be needed, what additional costs would be incurred and where those would be, and looking at the timing of everything to try to work through the best process so that we hopefully are able to make these improvements and make everything work as the developers coming in rather than being reactive once something was already done.
That's what we like to do, be ahead of things. What project ID is the traffic forecast update being submitted under? Is it R2513?
I'm uncertain of that unless you know. I can find out, but I don't have that.
Because the R2513 forecast was a huge forecast going all the way from Wiggins Road to North Asheville to North Merriman. So doing a new scenario for one little piece, I don't know if maybe they broke it down smaller. I just emailed the STFE to see what he had. Because it hasn't crossed my desk yet to do model updates or change that land use. But we'll be having to model it, whatever the scenario is.
Is the development that's ongoing right now with all the grading on the opposite side of 1923, is there a necessity for any traffic improvements with that development going on?
I've not seen anything on that. Have you guys in district had any?
I mean, we have went through the TIA process for that development, but it preceded Costco, so it doesn't take in the improvement, the additional traffic.
Yeah, I was just curious, because I can't imagine that with everything projected to come in there, that they're not going to make some sort of improvements.
Yeah, there are improvements in the TIA. They haven't submitted the driveway permit yet, so they haven't combined those improvements, but they're generally laid out in the TIA.
Any other questions from the group?
Okay, hearing none, why don't we move on to our next topic? One second. WNC passenger rail, please.
All right, and with us is Jason Myers from NCDOT Rail Division to provide an update on the Western North Carolina passenger rail project. Take it away, Jason. We cannot hear you, Jason.
Did we lose Jason?
He's there, but you can't hear.
And he appears.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. I got a new PC over the weekend and have not quite learned how to configure the sound with all the different apps and everything in the new docking station. So, and you can also see my screen, correct?
Yes.
Great, thank you. I apologize for my delay there. My name is Jason Myers. I'm the Rail Programs Manager with the NCDOT Rail Division. I'm going to give you an update about the Western North Carolina passenger rail effort and the Federal Corridor ID program and what we've been up to in the last little bit. First, I'm going to start by sharing what the Rail Division's mission is. It is more than just passenger rail. It is about the movement of goods and people. We have freight, passenger, and safety programs, and our main end goal is job creation, economic growth. And I'll do a quick overview of what our current passenger rail system is and kind of how expanding into West North Carolina is a part of that, the vision for that. This is our existing passenger rail system, our starter kit, if you will, and the trains between Charlotte and Raleigh, and then extending one train a day north to New York City from Raleigh to Selma, Wilson, and Rocky Mount are state-supported services that are provided by the DOT in partnership with Amtrak. The other trains that operate in North Carolina are Amtrak National Network long-distance trains. And as I said, this is what we are trying to build from and expand. And a part of the reason we want to expand is that we are growing and in that corridor with that service, and are very proud of our growth since pre-COVID times. We've grown 59%, and see the future of our growth to largely require extending more destinations into our network, and that includes the Asheville region and the West North Carolina corridor. The vision to do that is this map of intercity passenger rail corridors that are in the Federal Corridor ID program, shown in green, and then there's a few other places where we are not in that program, but we still have that vision, shown in blue. We've been a part of this program since 2023 when the grant awards were announced, and have been working over the last couple of years within those confines. I'm going to get more into what that is in a minute, but I'm going to take a second to talk about the broader Southeast regional framework that helps enable extensions like Asheville to Salisbury into West North Carolina. And the main story here is that North Carolina has a successful service between Raleigh and Charlotte, and Virginia has a very successful service mostly between Richmond and DC, but it also has Newport News, Norfolk, and Petersburg, and also some trains to Western Virginia. But we only have one train a day that really gets between them along this corridor. And we need to build the Raleigh to Richmond S line in order to link those two and have a much more robust regional system that will bring people to any number of places in the two states and beyond. So I'm going to spend most of my time, and though I will be going relatively fast, kind of reviewing some things that I communicated, I'm sure, to this body sometime in 2024 about what has happened to date, and what the program looked like. But I'm going to then go next after that into what's been changing and where we're going in the future. So just a reminder that we completed a feasibility study in December of 2023 for the West North Carolina corridor between Asheville to Salisbury. And really what that study did is it did a very high level capital cost and operating cost estimate. It made some determinations what we think approximate trip time would likely to be, and we did some ridership projections. We did this all on a 3 round trips a day sort of service, and those ridership projections were roughly about 100,000 trips within the corridor that involved Asheville, Salisbury, or some station in between, but did not go beyond that corridor. But that, depending on the assumptions you make of a transfer penalty, there was at least twice as many passengers that were going to transfer to services in Salisbury and go to destinations further, such as Richmond or Washington or New York, but also places closer like Charlotte or Greensboro or Durham. And what that means is our existing service and the build out of the Southeast corridor on the S line and the Raleigh to Richmond project are important to achieving those ridership goals. The bottom line capital cost estimate in that study is $665 million, which includes equipment and rail infrastructure. And that's what we've been working on trying to implement ever since. The Corridor ID program is, and this is an FRA slide, really is to deal with 2 different stages of project planning and project development in this life cycle, from having a systems plan, that's our vision, that's our state rail plan, all the way through operation of a service. And it does that in 3 different steps. The first step is really just the scoping of the next 2 steps, and then the second step is where we get into project planning and doing a service development plan. And the third step is preliminary engineering and NEPA. And the goal of all of this is to have shovel-ready projects that have clear cost estimates and clear scopes, and maybe more importantly, agreement from the railroads about what the service outcomes can be. This is all how the Corridor ID program was developed in kind of the 21 through 23 timeframe when we entered it, and is largely in that low level of detail staying the same. These are the tasks of a service development plan in terms of what the sort of things we will be analyzing when we get into that. But again, the main bottom line is it's an operational plan for how service works. It's a list of projects, and then that feeds the next step of preliminary engineering and NEPA. So I want to talk mostly about what has been changing, what have we been doing in the rail division, what has the FRA been up to, and what's going to happen in the next year or two. So one of the things that happened in 2025, and this was after we submitted a scope, schedule, and budget for a full service development plan, is the FRA basically kind of put things on pause a little bit and told us that they were considering some program changes. And that delay lasted through December. What the result of that was is that they've bifurcated the step 2 service development plan into kind of 2 sub-steps. Most corridors, including this one, are being required to do a reduced scope core SDP that focuses on, it simplifies most of the tasks. It focuses on feasibility, but it is a little bit more in depth than what we've already done with our feasibility study. So when we first heard about this, we were thinking that maybe our feasibility study would serve that purpose. We're finding out that that's not fully the case and that we still have some work to do to complete a core SDP. So we have now submitted all those materials for a scope, schedule, and budget of a core SDP back to the FRA and have gotten some positive indications that we're about to be done with step 1 and be moving into step 2. Another thing that we've done over that time was we completed an economic impact of the corridor study. ITRI, the Institute of Transportation Research and Education at NC State University, did this analysis for us. And these are the results of that, both in terms of one-time implementation of the capital project and also in terms of annual recurring economic impacts providing the service. There's over 5,280 job years. And what that means is a person working for a year. It might be 2 people working for a half year or 3 people working for a year and a half. Those are all, 1 job year, with $360 million of employee earnings and over $1 billion of economic output, including 33 million of local and state tax revenue from that economic impact. That's implementing the capital project. And then when operating the service in terms of the benefits to users and in terms of the costs of paying train crews and purchasing equipment and things like that, or purchasing supplies and everything, we have an ongoing economic impact that returns money into the state economy and helps keep things moving. So we're happy to see these positive results, and the full report is available on our website as well as a good executive summary. I want to talk a little bit about what it takes to implement a new passenger rail system, and this is I guess a logical construct that I'm testing out with you all for the first time. There's this 3-legged stool that we need all 3 of these things to be in place before we can run a successful and sustainable passenger rail service. One of them is ongoing financial operating support. That is, largely comes from fares, but it is generally not going to come completely from fares. Providing transportation services is not something that is usually a profitable business. Our highways and our transit systems don't generate a profit, and in cases where there is a profit from operations, there's usually an extremely high level of public involvement in providing capital to enable that. And that is not really the case when we have private railroads. The second major leg of that stool is having actual rolling stock available to us. And that is, at least for the time being, for the next couple of years, going to be a limiting factor for passenger rail expansion in most places in the country. There's a shortage. Luckily, there is a plan at Amtrak in the state of North Carolina is involved in it to alleviate some of those capacity constraints. They're building Aero train sets, is the brand name Amtrak is using, in both Sacramento and Lexington, North Carolina. And they're being tested and being rolled out later this year in some of the corridors. And that new rolling stock will help enable service expansions to places like Asheville. But a part of what I'm getting at is that it can't be, even if these other things were in place today, there wouldn't actually be rolling stock to run a train in an ongoing basis to Asheville. But there will be. And then the last and maybe the most important thing is actually having a railroad set up for passenger trains, which especially includes capacity to make sure that the operation's reliable, that it doesn't conflict with the important freight operations that are there that are important to both North Carolina's economy and the nation as a whole, and especially important to the companies who own the railroads and operate them as for-profit businesses. And a part of that is the agreements with those railroads that help set the terms of any financial payment for access to the tracks, and just the permission to use that. Those take time to set up. And in every case, a state that wants to implement a new state-supported service has to work with those railroads over time to set those situations up. So we're working on all three of these things. The ongoing financial support is really mostly, I guess I want to communicate, is a decision of the state legislature and executive branch of whether or not this service should be provided. And that is something that those of us that are civil servants don't get to decide, but it is something that we'll work with, and we'll make sure we communicate the options as we go forward. Another thing that we've been doing is sharpening our pencil a little bit on our feasibility study and some of the technical work that went into that behind the scenes. And what you're looking at is a time-space diagram, also called a string line chart. And I don't want you to really focus too much on any of the details here, but this is one of the ways that we've considered how we might operate the service. And the main feature I wanted to communicate to you today is that, and I'm going to animate in a kind of oversimplification here, that shows a train set starting in Charlotte and a train set starting in Asheville in the morning, making 1.5 round trips, laying over in both Asheville and Salisbury, and then ending in the opposite city. What this operating paradigm would mean, if it can be approved with the railroad, and that's something that they're aware of this idea, but this is not something that is certainly approved and vetted completely, is that we do not need to build a maintenance facility on the corridor. We need to build a layover facility, which might allow for some light maintenance, but we don't think that if we can accomplish this, we'll need to build a dedicated passenger rail maintenance facility in either Asheville or Salisbury, somewhere in between. That might make it a little bit sooner that we can implement the service, because we won't have a vertical construction type facility to build somewhere, and probably or potentially have to buy land and go through a whole permitting and design process to do that. We just have to be able to design a facility in Asheville to be able to lay over a train. That is one of the ways we're looking at trying to accelerate the delivery of this project and find opportunities to do it a little bit more quickly and a little bit more smoothly, taking advantage of what's a good relationship with our host railroad. So next steps and kind of starting today and going on into the rest of the year and into next year, here are some of the activities that I want you to be aware of. Well, first of all, is that we should be ready to celebrate the restoration of freight service to the old Fort Loops between Black Mountain and Marion, where Norfolk Southern, I understand yesterday, ran a geometry train out there. It's a part of the work to restore those tracks. And sometime in the next weeks or months, I'm sure they'll start to actually operate revenue trains on that segment again. That's great news for us, because it means that this project will not have to build a new railroad that was destroyed by the hurricane impacts, but we can improve an existing railroad and make it ready for passenger trains. We should anticipate kicking off the Corridor ID Step 2 process. That's the core service development plan for us. And that will be 90% federally funded and 10% state funded from a grant that had been applied for by NCDOT for a program called STAMP, and I apologize, I forget the acronym there. And a part of that will be setting up a stakeholder steering committee. And I have this in bold because both the MPOs and RPOs and the MPO staffs and the TCC members are who I envision being the main attendees of a stakeholder steering committee, all the way from Asheville to Salisbury. So the group I'm speaking to you today should have some people that are attending that. That'll help us coordinate our public involvement. It'll help us verify decisions that we might make along the way and get your input on things. We are also, moving on to the next bullet here, working with Norfolk Southern. They're, I guess, actively supportive of this project, and want us to achieve certain milestones as they're also going through a merger process with the Union Pacific Railroad. And we're doing everything we can to meet those timelines and engage with them, to be honest, slightly outside of the Corridor ID program. So while we are using Corridor ID to complete this core service development plan, we're also doing things that would normally be a part of the federal process to the extent we're able outside of that process, just between the state and the railroad, and think that that is going to lead us to service more quickly. At least that's our hope. Another thing is that we are currently going through the scoring process of Spot 8.0, and I'm slightly hopeful that there's a chance that we might be able to have some corridor match be funded at the regional level through that process. The project did not actually score all that poorly in the last round, and I have no information about how much funding might be available at the two different regions that the project is in. But what we have been able to do is make sure we're counting all the benefits, knowing what we know about the corridor, and that we're only focused on the cost that we know the project will have to implement, and that we're not, for instance, building the cost of a maintenance facility into our capital cost estimate. And that might help the score a little bit. And I'll be looking to engage with the MPOs and RPOs as we get into the process after scores are released to talk about priority points and if there's a chance that this might be partly be funded. And then the last thing is that we're anticipating some federal grant opportunities that might be coming up soon, and are trying to find out if we might be able to apply to do some improvements to the corridor that will help focus, it'll have a safety focus on crossing improvements is the idea, and those might help enable passenger trains in the future, but be an independent utility of a safety benefit to the existing freight service in the meantime. And the state does have resources we can devote to safety projects, and if we're able to expand those resources through a discretionary federal grant, it's going to make implementing this project and passenger trains a little bit easier and a little bit smoother in the future. That is the full content of my slides. I'll put my contact information up here, and I'm happy to answer any questions you all might have. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Jason. Briefly, the question that I get is, what's the earliest we could reasonably anticipate passenger service?
That's a good question, and that was William. I'll go back to this three-legged stool and talk about what I think the timeline might be for these things. And to give you the simple answer, we're probably dealing in a 5-year-ish time frame. Part of that is because of when that rolling stock will be made available. The Piedmont corridor service operates currently with rolling stock that is owned by the state, maintained by the state, and it's getting pretty long in the tooth. We expect that to be replaced by aero equipment in 2031 and 2032, and about the same time as when there'll probably either be aero equipment that can be available for this, or we may be able to reinvest a little bit in our existing rolling stock and use it for this service. But that's one of the reasons it can't really happen any faster, is that there will not, the supply chain and kind of the procurement process to get rolling stock. And we don't anticipate buying rolling stock specifically for the service, but basically renting it from Amtrak puts us out into that sort of time frame. The railroad capacity and agreements and building out the projects to increase the 25-mile-an-hour railroad up to 60 or a 79-mile-an-hour railroad, it will also take time. And implementing those capital projects is going to be also necessary and difficult to implement much faster than 5 years. But I think 5 years is probably the earliest. It may be a little bit longer than that, depending on a few things that we're working through with the railroad and to some extent with the feds. Other questions?
I had a question. Yeah, thanks. First, I wanted to thank Jason for his presentation, and it's just to say that it's really exciting to see this work continuing and what you've been able to how you've been able to move the needle forward a little bit. As you're aware, the French Broad MPO has been working on passenger rail for many years. There's already, I think there was a feasibility study done, maybe 12 or 15 years ago, looking at passenger rail. There was even at one point a call for proposals for communities to rebuild their railroad stations, and some actually did, and they got grants through, I believe it was the Obama administration, through the enhancement program. So this is something that I feel like our region has always wanted. I recall in those discussions that Asheville was the leading requested passenger rail service to Amtrak, for which there was no actual fixed service. There have been some demonstration trains run, and there's also been localized planning around particularly the Old Fort loops between Old Fort and the town of Black Mountain, which was part of the development of the Point Lookout bicycle trail, with a grand vision that wouldn't it be cool if we could create a tourist destination where people could ride the loops, and if they wanted, bring their bike and then ride back down the loops and ride from Black Mountain to Old Fort. So there's a lot of history around these efforts. And I think going forward, my questions would be, what else can we do as a region to let people know that this is important to us after 30 years of work? And then secondly, what is the political sway that we need to make people listen to us? And then secondly, I just got back from being in Florida for vacation, and I saw passenger rail running right through the middle of Stuart, Florida at high speed in urban settings, knowing that this can work. And how do we get North Carolina to up its game so that we can accomplish what other states are clearly accomplishing? Because what I remember most vividly was we all got excited and we did these planning processes and we spent hours and hours in meetings. And we were told, well, we're worried about at-grade crossings. We're worried about safety. We're worried about ridership or this or that. And my question is North Carolina really going to do this? I mean, or can we really move this forward? And what needs to happen from us? I mean, you can kind of probably sense a little bit of frustration, but I just think it's great. I just don't know why it's taking us so long.
Those are all good questions, Elizabeth, and the answers to those are largely things that I don't know that a civil servant working for a state DOT can clearly answer, because you're asking what political activities and what sort of advocacy will be effective, and that's not our role. That's not my role. I'm sure there are others out there who can answer that question better than me. I do understand that it's frustrating when things get to a point, but then they don't actually get over the hump, and you have to start back over from that same point again. And there's certainly a risk that, as I said, this is not a funded project. This is something that we are trying to find ways with the tools we have from the budget and the authority that we have today to move it forward. But it will take more to get that to happen all the way. And unfortunately, that's not how to get that to happen is not a question I can answer. One of the things I will respond to is that maybe in the past there was concern about will there be ridership. And I recently had an interaction with a retired previous rail division director, as a gentleman who's now in his 80s, who is a volunteer train host today, and he spends time, basically being an ambassador for our customers on Piedmont trains and the Carolina between Raleigh and Charlotte. And I asked him what was it like in the 90s when this was starting, and his anecdote was that most of the time there weren't all that many people on the trains. But that's not the case anymore. And I think that the success of the last, 5 to 10 years that we've had on our existing service demonstrates that this is something that people will ride and that that is desired. And that's maybe been proven now in a way that in 2009 or 2002 had not yet been proven. And I think that is one thing that we can use to make sure that we're I guess aware of what's different today than before. I also add that the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act provided a lot of opportunities for investment, and those grant opportunities I was speaking to earlier are maybe the tail end of that, in addition to the CID funding to do this planning work. So I think we do have some tools at our disposal, and I think there are others who can answer the questions about how to advocate for the region. But I know it's a priority of the Secretary of Transportation, the governor, to do things that will help enable the recovery of West North Carolina in its infrastructure and in its transportation service, and that this project is a part of that. And we'll see what happens. But thanks for your question.
Yeah, Jason, just to touch on something you said, I mean, I think what's an important thing to note is that a project like this didn't really have a clear path forward prior to the IIJA, or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. That law provided programs and funding that provided a path towards implementation that we hadn't had before. And so I know something you and I have talked about is one of the critical things for this project is going to be how the next federal transportation bill looks. You know, as Jason noted, you know, right now we are pursuing state match for this project through prioritization. But that's match for the federal programs that were essentially created and or expanded as part of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. So what happens with that law, especially in, I believe, the coming months, will be fairly critical about what our path looks like. Because if those programs change, then how we talk about you know, the steps forward to implementation is going to change as well. But also to Jason's point, you know, in June at our next meeting, we will be talking about regional impact projects. We anticipate the passenger rail project being one of those to be considered for our local input points, but that's going to be in the same funding tier as a lot of other projects that we know have been priorities. Projects like Delwood Road, Smoky Park Highway, New Leicester Highway, things like that. So for the MPO, part of the consideration is where does this project lie in terms of our priorities that fit within that funding tier? And if we can move from there, trying to use those funds to match federal programs as they might look in the near future.
Hey, Tristan, I have a quick follow-up to what you just said. Is passenger rail considered in the transit category, transit and freight category, or does it have to compete with road safety, highway safety?
So it's considered a rail project in prioritization, but it competes for funding in the regional impact funding tier. So projects in Region G, especially our US and NC routes, all of those projects will be competing. And something Jason mentioned earlier, we are very much anticipating, there's no email I'm anticipating more, no offense to anyone else sending me emails, than the funding availability email that is expected to come from DOT in late May.
I have one more, it's actually a comment, which is Jason had mentioned something about the need to purchase property for storage for the passenger rail, and that they were looking at Asheville and Salisbury. I can't speak for my colleagues, obviously, in Old Fort. However, there was at one point some early discussion about That area in Old Fort where the rail passes through, there's an old industrial site, there's some public park, and there's a good stretch of flat, empty land adjacent to the rail in Old Fort, which could perhaps meet the property need for any storage or passenger rail planning that is a lot less expensive and a lot more available than what you might find in Asheville and Salisbury. So just a comment.
I will respond to that, Elizabeth. I think that what we're anticipating doing, what the strategy is likely to be, is be able to negotiate something with Norfolk Southern for a small piece of their facility in Asheville. They have a lot of railroad right-of-way that they don't need fully, that has been rail purposes historically, and this could continue under those purposes, but for passenger trains under our system rather than a tradition. In the past it was used by Southern Railroad for passenger trains and Norfolk Southern for freight. So there's a couple different ways that might work itself out with them, but that's what we think that strategy is going to be as a piece of their rail yard in Asheville.
That's great. It's great to know.
Just to make a comment on your prioritization discussion. This is in the regional impact tier, and it covers a number of different planning organizations. So there's only a percentage of it that's actually in Region G and in the MPO. So while it does compete against these other projects for funds, the entire cost of it is not out of one specific regional impact tier. Impact pot.
Yeah, I believe it's 5 different planning organizations,
right,
2 or 3 different NCDOT divisions,
right,
but 2 funding regions.
Right.
So
also the other planning organizations and DOT divisions likewise will need to provide their local support.
Great point.
Great. Are there any other questions for Jason?
Daniel, I've been taking notes. I have a few questions. Since we're on funding, I'll state that even though there's the regional tier funding and there are the generic NCDOT funds that like all projects compete for, there are specialized funds for like CMAQ, for air quality and safety. And are there specific pots that are targetable for rail projects, rail funds? You already mentioned, Jason, possibly certain safety funds. Are there others?
Yeah, that's a good question. The FBRMPO program, and I didn't put slides in here about the FBRMPO program. That is state funding, and it stands for Freight Rail Crossing Safety and I think improvements. It is largely, that program goes to helping the short line industry, including the Blue Ridge Southern and the Great Smoky Mountain Railway in your area, maintain a state of good repair and maintain safe facilities. And those are usually given as 50-50 grants to those private railroads to do certain eligible activities. There are also in that pot of funding the ability for the rail division to use it directly for safety programs of certain types. And there's also economic development grants for, let's say, upfit of a new industry spur or a diversion project that will bring traffic onto rail that's currently going on truck. All of those things are a part of the FBRMPO program. And what our strategy is, what we're trying to do, it's not determined exactly yet, and the grant opportunity has not been released by the feds yet to respond to, but we're anticipating it will be there, is we'll use a small amount of that state funding for safety projects, and then inflate that amount available to upgrade the safety of this corridor with a discretionary federal grant, either through the CRISI program or the Rail Crossing Elimination program. They're both potentially coming out now, and we're trying to evaluate options between the two. So that's one pot. You mentioned CMAQ. We use CMAQ funding to help fund the operations of the Piedmont service currently, and have done so for a few years. That may be an opportunity in the future, depending on the air quality conformity status of the places we operate through, and the cleanliness of the trains and a few other things that I'm not sure. I don't know of a case of using CMAQ funding for implementation of the capital project, partly because it's a more expensive program usually than CMAQ might be able to support. And of course, you can't use CMAQ to match a different grant; it's federal funding. But those are the two that I'm thinking of. There are not other funds that I'm aware of other than just the rail division's allocation from the General Assembly, but that's going to our existing programs, and this would be an expansion, and we can only stretch that so far.
All right, two thoughts on that. While CMAQ may not be appropriate for the rail program itself, things like TOD, railing stations, sidewalk connections may more appropriately fit into the size and scope of that program. And secondly, a funding source that's been bouncing around my mind as we've gone on is our resiliency funds. I don't know if there are large-scale resiliency competitive grants, but we always talk about resiliency as, or almost always as environmental related, flooding related, but it is the ability of the system to bounce back from any disruption. And having driven up here and paid for gases, I think there's an oil economic resiliency question that could possibly be explored for those with creative minds. And as an alternative to driving, and since we already had the presentation for commuters coming in from McDowell County, this is almost a lifeline for them having to climb the mountain if there is that income interaction that we earlier talked about. And then my final comment, since I'm good at sticking my foot in my mouth, as the division knows, I'll try to address Elizabeth's question about Stuart, Florida. If I'm correct, that is the Brightline rail that passes through Stuart, which is a private company. And so how they interact and build out their facilities is just going to be different than a state agency like us. So.
That's it. Great point. Just a quick note, the anticipated cost for the project, I think the last estimate was $660 million. Jason, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, it was $665 million.
Apologies. I'm sure it's only gone north since then. And yeah, I mean, I agree with Daniel's point that there's a lot of alternative funding streams that, if successful, would be great. And but to note, I do think that it would take a lot of those. In terms of CMAQ, even with some of its challenges, I think the entire statewide allotment is $30 million, and a lot of those programs would either be difficult to use as match or might not be eligible as match, and would likely have some sub-regional allotments or other allotments for specific activities. But I do think the overall point of what are some other funding pots so we don't put all our eggs in one basket is a good one.
And if I can close the circle on my thought on resiliency, I was thinking possibly more the larger nationwide competitive grant programs that, they have tighter bills that they put out applications for every now and then, and or like using safety for individual intersections, possibly using resiliency to bring up to grade individual, say, bridge projects or rail crossings that may be needed.
I'll just note you picked a scab on that one. The Protect grant from Federal Highways was released in 2024. This TCC and board voted that we apply for a resilience plan grant, but that NOFO was redacted and has yet to come back out. So if it comes back out, that'll be great, but it's been in purgatory for some time.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Any further discussion?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Jason. With that, we will take it to 5307.
All right, just looking at this year's, or this fiscal year's 5307 sub-allocations. Give me just a second to set up my screen here. Section 5307, urbanized area. Sorry, technical difficulties. Urbanized Area Formula Program is a program that's administered through the FTA. It provides grants to public transit systems in urbanized areas, or UZAs, with populations of 50,000 or more. And funds are distributed based on formulas set in federal law in the current. Sorry. The current is currently under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, also known as the IIJA, or Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and that's been in place from 2021 to 2026. The NPO responsibility for 5307 funding is Section 5307 funds are allocated to FTA-defined UZAs, designated recipients. Our designated recipient is the City of Asheville. Those UZA designated recipients receive FTA formula-based allocations and equitably allocate funds to operators within each UZA. In the case that the NPO is not the designated recipient, the NPO must still determine how the funds are sub-allocated within the UZA. For fiscal year 2026, the 5307 allocation to the UZA was $4,322,617. The French Broad River MPO designates 10% of its allotment each year to the Job Access Review Reverse Commute Program, or JARC activities. And JARC programs are funded through a call for projects each year, which you'll recall we just had at the beginning of this year. And this year's allotment for JARC allocations would be $432,261.70. The French Broad River MPO uses the sub-allocation formula approved by the MPO board in 2023 to allot that 5307 funding received among transit operators within the UZA. Under this formula, Asheville, who serves as the designated recipient, receives 46.9% of the total FTA 5307 allocations. Buncombe receives 31.9%, and Henderson County receives 21.2%. Both Haywood and Madison County are outside of the UZA and are therefore ineligible for 5307 funding under this program. And just to put that graphically, so the funding comes from the FTA. The MPO is responsible for determining the sub-allocation formula and how that is designated to sub-recipients, and also holding a call for projects for JARC funding, which is 10% of those 5307 funds. The City of Asheville, which receives 46.9% of the funds, then turns around and sub-allocates that funding to Mountain Mobility, or Buncombe County Transportation, and that's 31.9%. It also goes to Henderson County, or Apple Country Public Transit, at 21.2%. For this fiscal year, under the 5307 allocation, the UZA received $3,890,355.30 after the JARC set-aside. According to the formula, Asheville received $1,824,576.64. Buncombe County will receive $1,241,023.34, and Henderson County will receive $824,755.32. And just to look at that over the past several years, you can see the jump between 21 and 22, where the IIJA became active, and we went from about $3 million in annual allocations to in the neighborhood of $4 million in annual allocations. And just to show that over the last several years, this goes from 2024 to 2026, because those are the years where Asheville, Buncombe, and Henderson County were the only designated subrecipients, and Haywood County became excluded from the formula due to the change in the UDA. But that funding has remained relatively constant throughout those years with only a minor increase in allocation. And so with that, I can take any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Daisy? Well, hearing none. Thank you, Daisy. We'll move on to regular updates. Division 13.
All right, Division 13 updates. I've got hard copies if anybody would like them, but our project development updates, the list is largely unchanged from what we've been seeing for the last few months. With the projects coming, we see various safety improvements, and then just like Division 14, bridges. And so we have that, but then our construction updates, providing some updates on things that are going on. I-4700, they have moved traffic to, I guess the best way to describe it, eastbound is eastbound and westbound is westbound. They're still working to open up the additional lanes, but with the traffic back to their appropriate sides, that has been a help, a little more area and width if there's an incident, to clear that more quickly and hopefully keep things flowing a little better. They are projecting to have westbound in all three lanes in late summer. They're continuing to do median work and preparing for opening those additional lanes in late summer. Also, the Parkway, we're having what I'm going to call miscellaneous lane closures, installing some final items there along the Parkway, but those are not daily. They're sporadic and should be over soon. So also with that, we have other projects that are going on, of course, out here at exit 44, 2513B and D. They have set girders, and probably or hopefully before much longer, we'll be seeing the deck begin to be poured on the bridge there. So moving on with that. And then also we have various other projects going on, specifically several paving contracts. So with that work ramping up in this time of year, a lot more construction traffic and things happening, so stay aware of all of those. But also Haywood Road continuing on with night work there, and glad to take any questions that anybody has.
Thank you, Doug. Any questions? Okay, well, let's move on to Division 14 then.
All right, construction updates. Same projects you've been seeing for a while. I think in Haywood County, the only thing that was added since our last meeting is a bridge on Crabtree Church Road over Crabtree Creek. There are some bridges that are nearing completion. The set of bridges on I-40 that's out near Jonathan Creek Road, where US 276 is, that's been under construction. There was 5 bridges there. They should be, or they are nearing completion on all of those. I-26 Henderson County, same thing that we said last time, is for the most part complete. The Green River Bridge replacement on Henderson County on I-26, that's nearing completion as well, even though the completion date did move out a couple of months there. Still have a completion date on the Acosta Trail, the second section of Acosta Trail in Henderson County. Yeah, I think that's Hollow Lake Road is actually nearing completion. Been a long time coming for that. That's it for construction updates. Project development, the only thing that I think has changed on the list is that very first bridge there in Haywood County, that lead date moved out a year. And in Henderson County, that acoustic trail section, that did let in the middle of last week. Bids were received. All the bids were as they should be, meaning that they're under 10% over the engineer's estimate, but the bid has not been awarded, at least last week it had not been awarded yet. I think that's it from Division 14, unless somebody has some questions.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions? Okay. Daniel, I think you're up.
All right. First off, a little PSA to make you aware of a fraud alert that has gone out. The North Carolina DMV is aware of multiple fraudulent text message scams that are happening right now, requesting payment for fees, fines, and tolls. North Carolina DMV will never request payment by text. Please report any text you receive as spam and delete it. Make others aware, pretty please. First news item. Last month I mentioned that we had North Carolina Department of Transportation had applied for a FAA electric vertical takeoff and landing program, and we did receive selection to participate in that program. And so some more details have come out about what we proposed and what we are trying to do. The NCDOT initiative known as ELIFT-NC, the Electronic Logistics and Integrated Flight Testing Program, will create a statewide network of electric air taxis connecting hospitals, airports, and rural communities to improve healthcare access and quality of care while meeting rigorous safety and infrastructure standards. We're trying to deploy air taxis in real-world situations to connect rural communities and expand mobility options, and to demonstrate how these type of vehicles can benefit residents across the state. The plan includes initial training, baseline operations, expanded route development, and ultimately hospital pad-to-pad missions. The program will also support planning for charging stations, vertiport development, and digital systems required for long-term implementation. Some private and public partners have already been identified and brought on board, including Beta Technologies and Joby Aviation, two manufacturers, as well as the Raleigh Executive Jetport to test our readiness. And in addition to connecting communities and medical access, strengthening disaster response has been identified as a goal. And we expect to begin implementation in the upcoming months, and we'll have more details as they become available. A little bit fun news: North Carolina students participated in a national art contest and received awards for their aviation contribution. The theme this year was Flight to Save Lives, highlighting the role of aircraft in emergency services. In two categories, North Carolina students placed and won awards. First place and second place in the junior category, and third place in intermediate category. And they will be proceeding to an international contest where North Carolina students have been recognized before. North Carolina Quick Passes are now going to be available at Publix locations if you need to grab one and you plan to travel to the Triangle of Charlotte and use them. But they are available at the community customer service counter and are, of course, usable in multiple states. Funding opportunity. Applications are open for the second wave of EV charging stations along major North Carolina highways. I think I maybe announced this last month, but the due date for applications is in May, and this involves really private businesses that want to apply for grant funding to have electrical vehicle charging stations built but they would be responsible to operate them. And this is the second round, and after phase 2 ends, we will be exploring additional corridors besides the major highway corridors for funding. And Vicki's already walked out of the room, so I'll also make her standard plug that US 34 and Smoky Bark Highway going out west of Waynesville is not included in the alternative fuel corridors that were identified. We want to pursue that when able. Just final update, press release came out about the 18-month Helene updates. You obviously need me not to say anything about that, but according to our statistics, 87% of the nearly 10,000 damaged sites have been repaired, but repaired is not necessarily permanently fixed, and there's still a lot of work to do. And that's it for me.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. All right, staff updates, please.
All right, really quick, just a few updates. I won't go through subcommittees. Some of the prioritization work was in your consent agenda. State legislative updates, budget maybe in the future. We shall see. That's all I've got on that front. Federal legislative updates, again, we're expecting a draft transportation bill relatively soon. I think there's been some varying dates between this spring and later this year about when that'll actually be released, but I think all the reports are basically saying that it's currently being drafted right now, and that'll play a big role into a number of things, including the direct allotment that comes to the FBO, transit funds, potential passenger rail funding, on and on and on. And will likely, however it shakes out, likely have impacts on the overall day. Some other events are happening. One thing to note, April 13th, the DOT Multimodal Planning Grant submission deadline. So that is coming up very soon. So we do have a resolution of support for Waynesville. But if anyone else is planning to apply, please let us know ASAP. Also on April 16th, the regional ITS plan that's being worked on, there will be a 14 meeting. On April 23rd is the I-26 connector, section B and D, groundbreaking. Big occasion. April 29th, NCDOT is hosting a freight forum at Land to Sky. That is to help them update their statewide freight plan. We have reached out to our local chambers to help get the word out and boost attendance. But if anyone's interested in joining, please let us know. May 6th through May 8th, FBRMPO conference at Crown Plaza, May 15th through May 22nd, Strive Not to Drive Week. Any questions or if you want to get involved with that, please contact Sandy on our team. Some recent events, the Western North Carolina Rail Committee held I think it was called a conference. It's a one-day event with a number of different speakers. Also, there have been public meetings for the Buncombe County Pedestrian Plan and the Woodfin to Weaverville Greenway study. I will note that I think I've only been to one public meeting more positive than the Woodfin to Weaverville Greenway study. I wasn't ready for all the pats on the back that happened at that meeting. Weird. And our Safe Routes to School program held a Confident Road Cycling Workshop last month. So that's all I've got. Anything else I'm missing?
Yeah, I'm going to add to the Strive Not to Drive since we're not meeting next month. I'll give you guys a little bit more info about that. Last year was our biggest Strive Not to Drive ever. We had 17 events in 3 counties. This year is going to be even bigger. We have 23 or 24 events happening across all 5 counties in the MPO and RPO region. So we have new communities participating, like Brevard, Mars Hill, Marshall, and Clyde, which I don't think many of those have never had Strive Not to Drive events before. All of the info is on our website, which I'll have Tristan share around with you all, but it's looking like it's going to be a really good week, so I hope you can take time to mark your calendar and participate in some of the events that we've got going on.
And this National Bike to School Day is on May 6th. So last year we had 8 schools participate in that across the region. Hopefully more this year.
Hooray.
The NOFO is out for Safe Streets for All. Applications are due May 25th, I think. And that covers for safety action plans and demonstration projects and also implementation grants.
Great. Thank you, Owen.
Excellent. Okay. I know you mentioned the budget. Do you have further legislative updates, Tristan?
Nope. That's it for now. I think the legislators reconvene in 2 weeks, so.
Yeah.
Maybe not anything until then.
They're back in session and working on it.
Okay. Just a special announcement. Again, if you weren't listening, we do not have a meeting next month. So don't come here. And or do whatever you like, but no one else will be here. So
We will be planning an informal get together for anyone interested, and we'll get word out on that.
all right. And okay, any other announcements or otherwise? All right, well, hearing none, we'll see you in June, everybody.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks, everyone.